Hey guys, time for another Hopper Hot Take, June 16th, 2026. Some of you can probably guess what we're going to talk about today. It's been on my mind all day long. I woke up this morning to see Matt Mangine's post. Many of you know Matthew Mangine JR died June 16th, 2020 of sudden cardiac arrest. That is tonight's Hopper Hot Take. Let's get into it. So tonight's Hopper Hot Take, again, June 16th, 2026. That means it's been 6 years since Matthew Mangine died. Matthew Mangine Jr. died of sudden cardiac arrest in northern Kentucky. I'm walking around the track, getting a little bit of movement in this evening. It is definitely warm in Dallas. Perfect time for a Hopper Hot Take. But go back 6 years, 2020. COVID is actually where Hopper Hot Take started. And if you go back to about the 10th video that I did, I talk about Matthew Mangine Jr. and him collapsing on the soccer field and ultimately dying. But today, again, I saw his dad post on Facebook this morning, and it's been on my mind all day. A lot of things, going through my head and different things. One of the things we talk about in sports is that sports teaches life lessons, and so something I want to talk about, because I was thinking about it earlier, kind of ties in and kind of doesn't, but it's all the same to me. In 3 days, June 19th, will be 20 years since I lost a teammate. Chris Hebel was a football player in Waterloo High School, Waterloo, Illinois. He was in my grade between our junior and senior year. Chris was killed in a car accident on his way to football practice. And I got thinking about that this morning, because like I said, in 3 days will be 20 years, and the time has flown by. When I think about Chris often, and especially in June like this. But like I said, life lessons. Something that we were told, because we didn't know how to handle this, right? We're high school kids. We didn't know how to handle this. But something that we learned from Coach Rose, who was and is to this day the head football coach at Waterloo, was, as athletes, as fellow students, you don't know how the parents feel, right? And you never say that, I know what you're going through, because you don't. And so that was something that, like I said, we were taught. And it's something I've thought about before, and I got thinking about today. And I don't know how Matt and Kim Mangine, mom and dad, I don't know how they feel, right? And I don't want to know how they feel. I hope to never feel that, right? But I've told Matthew's story numerous times, and I've heard Dad tell Matthew's story over and over again, and there's always something to be learned from it. And I feel honored to be able to tell Matthew's story when I teach CPR, and do those sorts of things. And I hate needing to tell his story and other student athletes' stories. When I talk about deaths in athletics and catastrophic injury in athletics, really, I talk about three major things, right? I tell my kids in my sports medicine class, sudden cardiac arrest is the leading cause of death in athletics. It's the leading cause of death on school campuses, and it doesn't have to be. But the things that I talk about with sudden cardiac arrest, three really important components. Having an athletic trainer, having an AED, and having an emergency action plan and knowing what to do in an emergency, right? And the thing that is really upsetting, specifically to Matthew's case, is that they had an athletic trainer on campus. They had AEDs, but they had a failure to execute the emergency action plan. They had a failure to get the AED. And ultimately, Matthew died because they didn't do the job that they were supposed to do. And there was a study came out, Dresner and his group, 2019, I believe it was, that says that sudden cardiac arrest in athletics has a 48% survival rate. And when you bring an AED into the equation, it comes all the way up to 83%. And when you have an athletic trainer and an AED, survival rate is nearly 90%. And what that means is that you can do everything absolutely right and an athlete will still die. I have colleagues that have been in those shoes. But you can do everything right, and 10% of the time they're still going to die. But it is a long way from 48% to 90%. And there are things that have to happen to get there. And as we've talked about in Matthew's case before, his school failed. And they didn't achieve 90%. And they don't even belong at that 90% mark, right? And so, again, I talk about this case because it's important. And, the things that Matthew's family have gone through and the things that Matthew's family has done since then, so that there aren't more Matthews out there, right? We simply can't put an athletic trainer in every sporting event in the United States. It's not feasible. And as hard as that is for me to say as an athletic trainer, that is reality, right? But what we can do and what we must do is we must have trained personnel. We must have coaches and referees and parents and league officials and athletes themselves that are trained in CPR. And we must have AEDs available in athletics. Because those types of things, starting CPR right away, getting an AED applied, getting EMS there, are all critical components of saving a life in sudden cardiac arrest. And so on the anniversary of Matthew's death, the 6th anniversary of Matthew's death, I encourage you once again, know where the AED is. Learn CPR. Push hard, push fast. And those things can make a difference. No parent should have to go through what Kim and Matt had to go through on June 16th, 2020. We can do better. We must do better. Our kids' lives depend on it. That is tonight's Hopper Hot Take.